So, coming up a week Saturday, we've got the return of the Juggernaut Joyce back in action against Filip Hrgovic. He was meant to be fighting Dillian Whyte, who unfortunately had to pull out due to a freak injury to his finger. Yeah, bore off Dillian, no one cares anymore, honestly. You just knew something was going to happen with Dillian Whyte, whether it be an injury or more likely a failed drug test. I actually think the Hrgovic fight is a much better fight, to be honest. They fought in the amateurs back in 2013. Good fight, to be fair. Joyce winning a split decision. I tell you what, it's scary seeing how mobile Joyce was back in the day when you compare him to now. Obviously, 12 years on. Hrgovic as well. I mean, he was young back then. Obviously, Joyce was still late 20s. He wasn't exactly a spring chicken, but very much in his physical prime. It was actually that long ago Hrgovic was representing Kazakhstan. So much for being a Croatian patriot, Filip, but there we go. As we saw with Dillian Whyte when he faced AJ, he obviously had a win over him in the amateurs and it meant nothing in the pro ranks, but maybe the fact Joyce has already beat Hrgovic will give him the confidence he needs to win this fight, which is literally win or bust for Joyce. I actually think it's a must-win fight for both men, but even more for Joyce, who is older. So it's definitely a case of the loser leaves town, which I think will make for a cracking fight because both men have no choice but to leave it all out in the ring. I think it'll be an absolute war. So let's have it. So the Juggernaut Joyce has a record of 16-3 with 15 wins coming via knockout. Now the demise of Joyce happened so quick, it's easy to forget what an unbelievable resume he actually has. He beat Brian Jennings over 12 rounds in 2019. Really good win. Underrated heavyweight Jennings. Then just a year later, he took Daniel Dubois' in a fight where not many people picked Joyce. I remember thinking Dubois was going to smash him in a competitive fight. I mean, it was a 50-50 on paper, but he made Dubois quit. And I know quit is a harsh word to use, but he made Daniel Dubois decide to stop fighting there. And really, Joyce was under the cosh. Everyone was against him in that fight. Frank Warren had both men at the time, still does now, obviously. But Daniel Dubois was very much his cash cow. He was desperate for Dubois to win that. So even Joyce's own promoter wanted him to lose that. And Dubois still is Frank Warren's cash cow. But that night was Joyce's night. His jab was unbelievable. And in the end, he battered Dubois, fracturing his eye socket. It was a sensational performance from him. And he was so brave in there. I mean, he took everything Dubois had because Dubois actually fought well that night. He landed some big shots, but he just couldn't put a dent in Joyce at all. And he landed so many big right hands. So Joyce's chin at the time was probably considered the best chin, certainly in heavyweight boxing, and rightly so. And then a couple of years later, he had a massive fight against Joseph Parker at the Manchester Arena. Now, I remember the build-up for this. It was huge. You obviously had Fury very much in the Joseph Parker camp. Andy Lee, of course, training Joseph Parker. Parker had only lost to AJ and Dillian Whyte. And most people did pick Parker to beat Joyce, myself included. I obviously had a lot of money on Parker that night because I'm a complete and a moron. And as always with Joyce, the fight delivered. It was a grueling war. It was back and forth, but it was always a fight where you felt Joyce had the ascendancy. You always felt he was in control. And in the 11th round, after wearing Parker down, he knocked him out with a lethal left hook to the chin. Brilliant performance from Joyce yet again. And at this moment, you really were thinking Joyce could not be stopped. He could not be knocked out. Yes, maybe you could outbox him. He does get hit. He can be beat. But as Joyce was saying, everyone has a plan until they punch me in the face and nothing happens. And then he fought Zhilei Zhang and the rest is history. Now, the first loss against Zhang wasn't the end of the world. It was a bad loss at the time because he was a huge favourite, Joyce, and it was a stumbling block. But it was definitely a fight where you thought, okay, in a rematch he can win. He didn't get knocked spark out. He got stopped. His right eye was severely damaged because Zhang couldn't miss basically with every punch he threw. But you did get the feeling that, okay, Joyce, if he puts on weight, he can beat Zhang in the rematch. He definitely came in too light for the first fight, but then in the rematch, he went completely the other way and came in looking like Big John Fisher. And then in round 3 of the rematch, he got KO'd with a right hook from hell by Zhang, which would have knocked out a horse. And that was a real bad, devastating loss for Joyce. And you couldn't help but feel sorry for him. And then from then, he beat Cash Ali, who is literally only famous for trying to eat David Price alive in a fight where he got disqualified in. I think he must have mistaken David Price for a bit of halal meat because he couldn't stop trying to chew on him. And then in Joyce's last fight, he lost a unanimous decision to Del Boy. And a good fight, to be fair. I had it 6-4 to Del Boy, but Chisora did drop Joyce in round 9, so it was a clear win for Del Boy. But a fight where Joyce had his moments, and for me, he looked a lot better in that fight than he probably had since the Parker fight, ironically. So He's obviously on the slide, Joyce. I mean, look, he's 39 now. He's took a lot of damage in his career, unfortunately. And there has been a lot of people in boxing be really concerned for Joyce, and understandably so. I mean, it wasn't good when you saw him freeze in that interview after Dubois just knocked out AJ. But to be honest, I think everyone was a bit stunned after that. But to be fair, if you look back at old Joe Joyce interviews, I mean, I remember when he first turned pro, and I remember watching an interview with him and Coogan on IFL. And I remember thinking, Jesus, is he going to say something? I mean, lovely fella. But he's always been a bit quiet in interviews. He's always been a bit slow, never been the best in front of the camera or on the mic. So I do feel as if with Joyce that he's definitely not been the most comfortable when being interviewed. But at the same time, given the way he fights, given how much punishment he's took, given the lack of defence, it is understandable that people are worried about him. And so am I, to be honest. He's a lovely fella, Joe. The last thing on earth you want to see in a boxing ring is anyone get hurt or take excessive damage. But I'm no expert on CTE. And due to excessive drug use, I'm a bit punch drunk myself. So who the hell am I to say that Joe Joyce shouldn't be fighting? The British Boxing Board of Control have deemed him fit to fight. He's fighting. He's a grown man. So it is what it is. We've just got to hope that he doesn't continue for too long. And I do honestly think that if he does lose this, it will be the last time we'll see him in a ring. And the way Joe Joyce wins this is quite simple. I mean, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. There's only one way Joe Joyce is going to fight, especially at his age now. And that is to come forward, let his hands go, try and apply the pressure and force a stoppage. And I think Joyce can do it. I mean, if this was a few years ago, I'd be really confident picking him. Now, you've got to say that it is a total 50-50 fight. But for me, if the Joyce shows up, that fought Del Boy against the Hrgovic that showed up against Dubois, I do favour Joyce. I know that's an unpopular opinion, but for me, Joyce showed more desire against Del Boy than what Hrgovic did in the end against Dubois. So I do think that Joyce is a slight favourite. I know he's not with the bookies and with most people are picking Hrgovic, but I do feel as if people are overlooking Joyce, but he's got to be careful early because Hrgovic will come out the traps flying. And for me, Joyce's best chance is to get Hrgovic down the stretch. It's only a 10-rounder this, so he doesn't have long to get him. But even at this stage of his career, for me, Joyce is more than capable of winning this. So El Animal, Filip Hrgovic is 17-1 with 14 wins coming via knockout. Oh my God, he's a bit boring, isn't he, Filip Hrgovic? I've never quite got the hype with him. Honestly, he's just dull in the ring, dull out the ring, doesn't really say anything, doesn't really do anything. He's just sort of there, isn't he, Hrgovic? He's like that guy we're meant to rate, but nobody knows why. I mean, his best win by far is Zhang, which was on the undercard of Usyk AJ2, but everybody thought Zhang won that, myself included. He actually dropped Hrgovic, so Hrgovic got very lucky there. And then other than that, who else has he got on his record? I mean, Dempsey McKean, we just saw him get splattered in a round against a young Moses Atuma, albeit a fantastic prospect, but it took Hrgovic 12 rounds to get rid of him. Mark Demori, do me a favour, he has one of the most padded records in world boxing, add chin Mark Demori. And then, of course, he faced Daniel Dubois, and to be fair to him, he done all right for a few rounds. He landed so many massive right hands on Dubois. How the hell Dubois stayed up, I'll never know. But then, of course, Dubois came on strong. He broke Hrgovic's heart. And although Hrgovic didn't quit, he definitely looked like a beaten man. He was feeling sorry for himself. And Dubois, of course, forced the stoppage in the 8th round. So for me, if Hrgovic doesn't get Joyce out of there early, I think Joyce will break his heart. And there's a good chance Hrgovic will catch Joyce, a Joyce who isn't the same fighter, clearly, who doesn't have the same punch resistance. I would not be surprised at all if Hrgovic stopped Joe Joyce. However, I think Joyce will weather the storm early doors, and I think he will force a stoppage in the second half of the fight. I just don't think Hrgovic is that good. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if Hrgovic pulled it off because this is a 50-50 fight. And I know most people are going with the Croatian, but I do think Joyce has one last big performance in him, and I do think he will stop Filip Hrgovic. And I have no doubt that this fight will come down to heart, desire, and who wants it more. And in that case, there is only one winner, and that man is the Juggernaut. But yeah, it's a good card, to be fair. We've got David Adelaide fighting Jamie TKV for the vacant British heavyweight title. I think Adelaide will win that inside 6 rounds, but it'll be fun while it lasts. And also the pro debut of heavyweight Delicious Ori turning pro after the Paris Olympics. It'll be interesting to see how he gets on. It's a shame Lawrence Okolie had to pull out against Richard Riakporhe because that was a really good fight, but it is what it is. Unfortunately, we do have to get used to pullouts in boxing. It still should be a banging night. But yeah, anyway, guys, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Subscribe if you're new. Have a great week, and I will see you all on the next one.